I was born in Cologne, Germany. My maiden name was Summer. My parents they were a good middle-class family, and they had clothing stores, ready-to-wear for men and women. And my mother worked in the afternoon in the store, and we children in the beginning, we had a baby, not a kind of a babysitter, and she took care of it when my mother worked. And then 1933 it started already, of course. We were pretty young. The Nazis started. And my father was a true German, only his religion, the religion was Jewish. But he was so German that he always believed it won't get worse. It can't happen because he was in the First World War. He was, so he couldn't. And most German people, I think, they were very nationalistic. Is that the word? And still German. So religion was only Jewish. Let's see. We lived in an apartment but there the houses are different. You live on the third or fourth floor. The houses are very close together. So we lived there. We had a big apartment, if you call it apartment. And we went to, my sister and I, my sister was 3 years younger. We went to a school where mostly Catholic kids were. And they had their prayers, for while we were there, and there was no difference between the ones who went to school with, there was no difference. You had girlfriends. You started, for 6 years, 7 years. Girlfriends, nobody asked. There was no difference if you were Jewish or not. So then I think I remember I stayed 4 or 5 years in this starting school, public school. And I don't know, I learned, I think, with prayers too. I remember, and we had some Christmas, we had some plays, and I was an angel and stuff. There was no difference. We went, I think we went to a temple, I forgot now, on Saturday, a little bit, not too much. There they still had separated the women, I think, upstairs and the men downstairs. And we went, and then we even, at this school, we couldn't have religious lessons, so there was in the afternoon, I don't know, once or twice a week, a cantor came and he taught those few Jewish people, he taught them Hebrew, which was very hard, and was half German, half Hebrew, the books, we had to cover up the German, the translations. I remember I cheated always a little bit, because it was hard, Hebrew. And then that was already, then it started to stop. You couldn't have that anymore, So in the meantime, we moved in another apartment. So then, let's see, then one day, you couldn't even go to, then I went to a middle school, which starts the 5th grade and 6th grade. And I went there every day, and it was about 20 minutes walk. In the whole school, I was the only Jewish girl. And what I remember was just terrible. You were really branded. And because they went always to religious school, they had to go to a church, and I had to wait outside, till they come back. So they know darn well you were Jewish. And you felt, I remember, I felt really bad. And they, and for instance, I just remember in gym class, I was a little plum, and I could never do certain things. And again, they made remarks even about something about Jewish, So it started to get very bad. So finally, they said, you can't even go there anymore. You have to go back to school in like a Jewish school, which was run by Jewish people. So we went to the Jewish school, which was, I think we had to take a bus, I forgot, or a streetcar those days. And also the trouble was, because there was no school on Saturday, we had to go on Sundays also to school. And every time also you went to the streetcar on Sundays, again, to say, here are the Jews, you know. So it was always very kind of bad. So then my girlfriends, I had two Jewish girlfriends, and two, I think, Gentile. So then they made all of a sudden a law. They were not supposed to associate with you anymore, you know. So you have how old are you? 8, 9, 10? And you had your girlfriend, and she wasn't supposed to speak to you, not see you anymore. It was terrible. I remember that also. I felt, you know, how you feel when you're young and you're kind of persecuted. I mean, and then it started to get real bad, you know. And then you were not allowed to go to movies, not to play. To almost nothing was all verboten. And then they started, you see, I can now remember the years, you know, I go a little faster. Then was let's see. Yeah, but our family, you know, we had some relatives and you visit to each other. But now I remember we never were we didn't keep up too much religious tradition, hardly, really. I can't remember why that was, you know. I think a little bit, but I think we never had a Passover. We had, I think, Hanukkah, but we had also a Christmas tree. It was strange, but you weren't so tuned to this. And I would say that our family, that's just what I remember, everybody, we didn't look so, what you call, Jewish looking. So we were in a way lucky, you know. You were, again, when you went on the street, was better for you, you know, which was in a way good. And sometimes they didn't even know you were Jewish, you know. So then you lost your girlfriends, you know, because they couldn't associate with you. And so then maybe I go too fast. Then the Kristallnacht, you know, that was in 9th of November, 1938. In the meantime, okay, how old was I? Almost 14 years. So school was over, and I started to, there you are apprentice, whatever you can get. So I tried to get a job with 14 in some stores. They wouldn't take you because you were Jewish. So I think one day I worked for selling gloves, I can remember. And the next day they told me I have to go because of Jewish, you know, was verboten again. Then I went and started to work in a beauty shop. You know, you start out. The same thing. After a week they told me to go. And eventually I landed up in another beauty shop where the man was an SS, but because he saw his opportunity, I didn't get any money, so I had to clean, and he taught me a little bit, you know, your hair, you know, to do hair, but very little, mostly cleaning every day, doing the big laundry, and he didn't have to pay me. He basically he was really okay German, but he had to be in the SS or, you know, in this party. And I went there for a while every morning, also half an hour walking. And this one morning, that was the 9th of November, 38, he said to me in the morning, where's your father? And I said, he's just in Berlin. He went on a buying tour, like you go here to New York. And he said, where's your mother? And I said, I think she's home. And that moment, you know, you look outside, across the street there was a butcher shop. And they were just smashing the windows, throwing out the meat. And, you know, it was really frightening. And my boss, he said, you better go home and see where your mother is. You better go and where the store is, So I left. And I went to where our store was, again, 20 minutes walk. And when I got there, I saw the same thing. The windows were smashed. They threw out all the dresses and suits and coats out of the window. I went to the back door, and the Nazi was there. He said, what do you want? And luckily, I didn't say I was the daughter. Somehow I didn't say that. He said, better get going, go away. So I felt, and it was horrible. Then I had to walk back where we lived, and I saw all this, this smashing, and it was just horrible. And they take, you saw all this, what you, I'm sure, see a lot already in movies. And I went to back to my mother's house, and my sister had not come home. We were so worried. She had to go to other school, also a Jewish school. Anyway, she came, and we didn't know what to do. And luckily, my father was on this buying tour. He didn't call, but my uncle had also a same store. They went in his store. He was there. They took him out of the store and took him to Dachau. So it was, in a way, again, lucky my father wasn't there. And I think he came home in a day or two, because same thing happened in Berlin. So he was a little cautious to get home, And that time my grandparents lived there too, not too far away. I think we went there, we want to know where they are and what's happening. So all those things kind of happened. After that, then my father then finally said, what are we going to do? Like I said, so far, he didn't believe this happens. So then if you applied to get to America, you had to have a sponsor in the USA. And we had nobody really. Only thing my father had an uncle in Zurich, Switzerland. And he sponsored us, kind of. And he did everything what you had to do. You had to deposit money, which was just in case, not really, And so then finally we got a number from America, a number. And it was such a high waiting number that it was just, we were scared. Numbers didn't go. The Americans were very slow. You had heard that before. And so we waited every day. So everything was, no schools anymore. Then they had rationing. Wait a minute, that was 38. Anyway, in 30, no. Okay, so we got this number and waited. But in the meantime, my father tried through somebody else to get to Sao Paulo. They took Jewish people in. So we all, I forgot now what we had to do, my parents. We started to even learn Portuguese. And then we found out it was a swindle, that they took the money. I think this uncle also did this. It was a swindle, so that wasn't good. Then we tried to get to Shanghai and to Johannesburg, South Africa. But it just didn't work. Too many people wanted to get out. And we also had these relatives in Switzerland, but Switzerland wouldn't take you. We tried that, just they wouldn't take you. So then, on those years then the war, then we tried for England to get in. There was the same thing, waiting. And September 39, my father goes up to the English consulate, which they told him, you can come and pick up your papers for England. That day he walks up, and that moment the war breaks out. And so that was out. In a way it was good, because England, the war, England and Germany started then. And then they had rationing for food, and the Jews got less, and we only could go in a store a certain hours, certain days. So again, you were standing in line, you were all, of course, Jewish, and the SS was around there. And if you, I forgot now, if you said something wrong, they took you out of the line, you never were heard of either, too, you know. So it was all terrible, those years were very frightening. I remember every day were different laws, you know, against the Jews. One morning SS came upstairs, and they took I think we had a radio and books, you know, they had started burning the books were written by Jewish, you know, people who write
Authors.
Authors. And so they came up and just took all the things they felt like taking, and there was nothing you could say. You know, you were scared. Then they made a law in your apartment, you had to take other Jewish people in. They had to just live there. You know, so I mean, every day was something else. In the meantime, you know, you get very frightened, you know, and my father then, he was so nervous and so on, still couldn't believe it, you know.
Was he able to work during this time, or did he have to
No, everything was a standstill. What he did, they had Jewish people formed some classes, I guess, and this was a tailoring class, and I think, no, tailoring when you cut, for cutting clothing, and I think he tried to go there every day to learn this, just to do something to, you know. So then they, what else they did? Oh yeah, the food was rationed anyway because of the war, but Jews got much less. But there were such nice neighbors we had. I mean, in general, the German population, in general, they were just okay. But they were afraid, so they came at night and brought us fruit, stuff we couldn't get, and things. But they risked their life just as much, because if they were caught doing this, they would have been thrown in concentration camp. So there were still German people who tried to help somehow, you know. And mostly my parents, most friends were not Jewish. You know, you didn't care. I mean, yes, they had Jewish, but mostly anybody, you know. I did, again then, for a while, worked for a Jewish seamstress, and she paid me very little. You know, I started learning a little bit, because I was out of school, and I wasn't like, oh, and then they made a law again that all people had to go to, how you call this, they were forced to do some labor, some work. And I ended up in a box factory to work, and it was not too far away, and it was like on the 4th floor, and they had, first you saw that gentle people were working, then they had a wall. Behind that wall was the Jewish people. They had a whole table full of Jewish people. It was like one was a lady who was running this. They were all Jewish. I was then, I think, the youngest. And it was full day work. I forgot now, 8-9 hours. And they paid you, like you would say here, 25 Pfennig, which means 25 cents an hour. And also they didn't pay you Social Security, nothing, because they figured Jewish people, we don't have to, you know, and they want. And every Saturday morning, the young ones, I think I and somebody else, on the 4th floor, we had to clean those, I remember, terrible steps, like factory steps. We had to clean step by step and clean the toilets. You know, they made you because you, again, you know, was Jewish. Then the war started, and almost every night there were air raids. And mostly when the moon was out, it was a light night. We know already they will come tonight. So we had to go to the basement, and the windows, we had to put curtains on, you know, so it's dark, for Dunklung. You know. And we were not supposed to go on the street after 7, I think. So air raids, during the night we were asleep, and then you get up, you run in the basement, and you sit there and don't know what happens because bombs used to fall upstairs, sideways, the house you lived in. It was just, and you could tell already, you heard the stuckers, and I remember it was so frightening. You heard them, how they came. And I remember my mother was so nervous one night, she runs down and takes a large knife with some bread. You don't know how long you'll be there. This was really going on almost every night, and in the morning early, you had to be at work, I think 7 o'clock. I just tried to remember in this letter, my sister did write, when she was younger. I forgot really at this moment. I think she still could go to school, She was a few years younger, but I was forced to work. And my father, because he had this course, he learned this kind of tailoring, he was exempt, which I'm surprised now, to go labor, work on the street or in a factory. But most people, they had to work in some other factories. My mother did not. She was just at home, She had a hard time to get food enough and things like that. I had an uncle, and the uncle was the one who went to Dachau, which they took. But somehow he escaped, I don't know how, to Brussels, Belgium. And he kind of told us later, of course, what already happened there, what they did to him and what he had to do, A few things I remember, they let him stand all day outside. It was pouring rain, stuff like that, without clothes or food. But he somehow, and I can't remember how, he escaped to Brussels, and his family eventually left too, but that was all much before we left, I remember sometimes we met on a big plaza at night, well, like Jewish children. It was already very dark. We met there because there was nothing you could do. You couldn't intermingle with people anymore. You were totally more or less by yourself. And then always, every day, I can't remember so well, but every day there were other laws, what you couldn't do and what. And eventually they came and took everything. Finally we got the word, okay, you can come to Stuttgart. There was the American consulate, and you can come to Stuttgart, and you get your visa. I mean, we talked to you. So we had to go on the train out to Stuttgart. And I never forget, we waited and waited, and then finally we went to the office of the consul. And I never forget, it was the first time he was sitting there with his legs up on the desk, We came in. We thought it was very strange, not very nice. And he questioned everyone so much. You were not supposed to have any sickness, of course, nothing. And it was just also interrogation from this American consul. And then I think they said, I forgot now if we got then finally papers there or if they were sent, I don't remember that. So anyway, we went back to Cologne on the train, and there they had air raids too while we were in the train. There were bombings. So you never knew, really. So we made it back, and then we had to arrange to somehow get out. And this was very difficult, again, to get really out of the country, because it was high time. It was already 41. Yeah, it must have been 41 in the beginning, or a few months, And of course, through there were some Jewish committees. There you learned how you can maybe make it out, or what you need, and so this and this and that. So then when we had the papers. Finally, this was like gold, to get. And then the air raids at night, so my father never know what to do. Should we leave the papers upstairs and go in the then the mom might come upstairs, or what is the best? So he said, no, I stay in bed with the papers. If the bombs come, I'd rather die in bed. You know, it was really, you didn't know what to do. And then you had to work a long time on this. And finally, then there was, again, you heard, you could, you have to come out together and leave everything behind. Just take one suitcase each and take 10 marks. You know, let's say like $10, 10 marks, that's all you could. You had to leave everything behind. Jewelry and, you know, everything. You know, you were insured, so anything. So then finally, I think, the day we left, we had to take the train they put you, because the Nazis or the SS put you in the train. You couldn't even sit down, it was so crowded. And they closed up when you finally were all in this, there were compartments. When you were in the train, they closed it up. I mean, you couldn't get out or in. And then I think they were already in France, I think so. So you went from Cologne to Berlin. Oh, there we stayed a day or two, I remember. And then again in this train to Paris, to France. But then the Nazis were already in France. And there was no food on the train, there were no toilets. And then finally they let you out one by one on the train station in Berlin, in Paris. You can go to the toilets, you know. So, and that's another experience I don't think I want to talk about. And then you back in the train, and then the train went to the Spanish border. I remember the name of the little city, Hendaye, that's Spanish border town. And there you had to get out of the train, and there was waiting on the other side in Spain a committee of Jewish people. They prepared food, because we had no food, nothing. So there we had to stand outside first, and the SS, I see them very much, I see them all right. They came by, looked you over, everyone by everyone, you know. Some they picked out. They had to come and, I think they searched them. You got undressed, you know, because you were not supposed to take jewelry or diamonds. Or I remember I had a folding umbrella, and they took that thing totally apart. They were afraid I would hide something in there. And we finally made it over the border. Then the committee gave us, I remember, in a big hall, food, the first food we got in a long time. And of course in Germany that you couldn't even get milk anymore. Mostly it was potatoes and noodles, and stuff like that. And then again with the train to Barcelona. In Barcelona we stayed 2 weeks in a hotel which was again sponsored. In the meantime we had no money. But this uncle sponsored this again. Luckily, this uncle was there, and he was okay to do, he could do this. Then we stayed in Spain, and then they changed the boat. We were supposed to leave, and they changed it every day. Next week, next week, next week. And the boat was a Spanish boat. Those days, the Spaniards, they were almost like the Nazis, a little bit. They made you pay for this, like first class, but it was like fourth class. And it was a ship which only could hold 400 people. They put 1,000 people on there. It used to be a prisoner boat, something, So we finally made it on the board. It was just horrible. We slept on planks, the men on one side, the women on the other side, one bathroom for all those people. I mean, women and men. And food was also terrible. A lot of with olive oil, we aren't used to, olives and lamb, but very bad, And So then eventually we left with the boat, but the Strait of Gibraltar was mines. There were mines in the water. So also that was very dangerous, you know. And then they stopped, in the middle all of a sudden they stopped the boat, the ship, and forgot now, I think Nazis came on the boat. They were looking for somebody like a spy, you know, so we were held up. So there was always moments by moments you were so scared. You didn't know if you will make it. You couldn't say until we finally land in America, then we make it, then we made it.
The boat was all Jews?
Yeah. They
And
were also from Germany and Vienna. I know there were Viennese people on the boat.
And sponsored by the Jewish agency?
Not the boat.
The boat,
You
no.
had to pay yourself, really. You know, you paid yourself. But in our case, somebody sponsored this, you know. But they were all Jewish people, yeah. I think there were only Germans and Viennese. I can't remember if they were Hungarians. I can't remember anymore. You know, we were still on the young side. So then we finally made it to Lisbon, and then they kept on stalling us, because then we went to Canary Islands. And there we had to get off the boat, and they said, we can't let you go ahead, the Spanish people, the Spanish. You have to pay more. And nobody had money. So we were frantic, you know, so I don't know, somebody, I forgot now, they sent again to a committee in America, you know, if they can send money, because we were stranded it was Canary Island, Las Palmas, and so when, again, you know, you didn't know what to do, but then finally, after 2 weeks, I think, you finally get going. So it took almost, I forgot now exactly, 4 or 5 weeks we were on this ship, you know, finally landed in New York, and the doctor on the ship, he had to inoculate you for something, and he used one needle. And my mother landed in America with an arm like this. We had to, I think, go to the doctor, you know. In the meantime, my uncle, which was in concentration camp, he was in New York already with his family. And so we stayed there for a little bit only. And then, you know, you were young, and I mean, you landed in America, and you right away had to look for a job. And my parents, they couldn't, you know, they were totally, my father was so, what is the word, something like heartbroken, that he could never believe, he still could not, that this can happen. He was such a, you know, he was in the First World War. And and then when he came over here, he gave up all religion. He believed there can't be anybody there if this all happens, you know. And of course, in the meantime, my girlfriends, I had the Jewish ones, they all, after 2 months, they were all sent to concentration camps, and I never heard of them, you know. And we had other relatives in Cologne, same thing, you know. Some were waiting for a number, but they never made it, because America was so slow. You know, you heard this before. They could have done better, you know. There was no reason to do this, and so the people we know, a lot of people, they just perished, you know. We don't even know where they actually went, you know, something like that. And coming back again to, I don't know, to my childhood, when you're young, you feel very intimidated, you know, very, and I remember this so well. In fact, when it was so bad, my father and father said, yeah, we should try now for America. And then I remember that the thought of going to America, this was terrible. You had heard there are only gangsters and millionaires in New York. You know, it was just, you were young. And it was very frightening and frightful. You know, and then you come over, you don't really speak, well, like one word, and it's very hard. Now you think you're never going to learn a little bit English, you know. And I never had the opportunity to go to school because we had to help our parents. There were no ifs and buts, and you did it gladly. So I never even had, like I said, the opportunity to go to school or meet people, you know. And you lost all your friends you had and your relatives. And then finally my grandfather, he eventually died, you know. Luckily, I don't think he had to go to concentration camp. So it was just, he died pretty fast. When we all left, he was really alone. We were basically a small family, really, you know. Then the other brother was who went to Dachau, and that was small, you know, kind of small, very small family. My parents had a lot of friends, you know. Even as children, my mother had gentle friends with also children than our age, and they got together all the time. And one day also, I remember they told my mother, well, we can't be friends anymore, we are afraid. And then this, you know, was really horrible. All of a sudden this was all going, you know, was nothing anymore. The only thing my husband, who had, he was born by Cologne, and his mother was Dutch. So they went to live in Holland because the mother was Dutch. They thought, now we are out of Germany, you know, we go. But it was also too late. In no time, they came to Holland. So my husband and his family, they were hidden away in an attic room like Anne Frank, and Dutch people did this, you know. They really, they stayed for 2 years in this attic room, not going outside, being quiet, because the Dutch family who hid them away, they had little children, and they had to tell them, you know, how quiet they have to be and not to say a word. They brought them food, little food, not much. And very often my husband had told me, in fact he made a tape also before he died, that SS did come to the house searching, and luckily somehow they didn't find him, and this happened many times, you know. It was just a very bad thing. But there were a lot of Dutch people, they were also, you know, the story, very nice, you know, and did this, risking their own lives. When then they were liberated when I think Americans came finally after 2 years, you know. And he had, that's what I mean, he had kept up with the people who had hidden him away, you know. He corresponded, and I think he visited them once or twice, you know. But in Germany, just remember there was one man who worked in the store, my father. After a while, yes, he kept up with my parents, you know. He sent them little packages, and he had loved my parents, and had loved to work there. So I found out he just, a few years ago, he passed away, you know. And I tried to contact him through his children. I did write a letter, but I never got any answer back, so I don't know. That was very few, really, you know. So, I don't know, that a little incidents I can think so quick, you know, what happened too. Of course, I always say now that I can't believe how lucky we were in last moment, you know. And then I know my sister wrote that she felt how come we were so lucky somehow that, and everybody we know, you know, perished. And she could always, bothered her in this life, it bothered her also very much. Why she, why not them? You know, and then and it was very, when we waited and waited, you had the feeling you're never gonna make it. Because, you know, the number was so high, and we tried all those other countries. And there were some people that somehow made it out to South Africa and Shanghai and Mexico, some, you know, I can remember. And I think with my parents, we did talk about what all of a sudden had happened. And then you had a feeling, because you heard a little here and there from Jewish people that time, that we better get out, that they do bad things. You didn't really, I think you had an inkling. I would say my parents more than we children, because I think my parents even tried to shield us a little bit. I think so, that we were still young, to not to worry you too much and so on, But you kind of had a feeling, but not to that extent. And I'm sure at that point that the other people, the gentle people, I don't think they knew this either. Not the ones who lived next to you on the next block or were their friends, Of course, the ones who had to join the SS or did join the SS because they wanted to, I'm sure they knew it, because you didn't associate with them, really. My girlfriends, which I remember, that she took me even to the train station, and now from them I didn't hear so well. Only my girlfriend had parents who, her father was how say that? An invalid from the First World War, First World War, and they still were in Cologne, this couple, and then they were taken to concentration camp. But somehow they escaped. I can't remember, or they were liberated. And this lady had then finally moved to Florida, and I visited her once, and she remembered me because I was there every weekend. We got together, and she showed me pictures of my girlfriend and myself, and then she told me that she somehow heard that this girlfriend of mine was, forgot now which concentration camp, and she eventually died on, there was some disease, typhoid fever, I think it was, and strangely enough, this older lady, which was by then pretty old, she somehow got, she was still liberated, And those days she told me all what happened, but I can't recall too much. In the meantime, this lady died too, passed away. There were some other people which just, we don't know what happened to them really, Many people you don't know. And then too, my parents had so many non-Jewish friends, really. But they never contacted us. Somehow you didn't. But there were two, and now I remember, there were two families my mother knew. And after the war, I remember now, she sent care packages to them in Cologne, And they were very thankful, which were gentle people. But that's contact a little bit my mother still had. Some elderly people my mother knew, really,
Did you ever go back?
I went once back only, and I felt not too bad. I was thinking, the young people that time, they were not. They were not Nazis, so I didn't feel that bad. When I met some elderly people, much older than me, I had a funny feeling, They probably denied, we didn't know what was going on, everybody, But then I had a very funny feeling, and I didn't feel very well about it. But then, it was still the town I was born, and I spoke the language, and you still remember those days. And I tried to go back to the house upon we lived, and I was standing downstairs, but I didn't have the nerve to ring the bell and say, so and so. In the meantime, this was all bombed. After we left, whole Cologne, you probably, I don't know if you heard about, the city was pretty much bombed. But what they did, they built up all the places again, was very historic buildings, and they built them up like that, like they were before. So they built pretty much. And like I said, today there's more or less nobody left. Well, one thing I told you like before, that I feel very fortunate that I survived this. And many people did not. I think something like that.